80% stat in favour. Then you might have 10%, 15% who are kind of not quite sure. And as soon as you start breaking down some of the myths, giving them a bit of the facts that's based on what's happened in Sydney and around the world, then generally those people go, oh, okay.
They're willing to listen.
And they're willing to listen. And look, the bottom line, I just keep going, I've lived in and around this area for about 20 years. I ride past there every day. I firmly believe it can only be better. And all the statistics show us that it will be better.
Yeah.
And, and then the other, 5 or 10% that are vehemently opposed, I try and approach them about the economic side of things. 80% decrease in ambulance call-outs in the first 3 months of Sydney's centre opening. 80% decrease. That means all of us can be looked after if something wrong happens to us, It's a huge stat, so you can spin it.
What are of those 10% that are vehemently opposed? Is there a common reason? Is there a common...
Well, it could be cultural, it could be religious, or it just could be that they think we've got just a black and white binary opposite view of the world, that taking drugs is illegal, taking drugs is bad, we shouldn't be supporting them and by giving them somewhere to go. They should all just be locked up. And look, that's that's life.
Yeah.
People have got those views, but
it's hard sometimes, I guess. What I've found while doing these podcasts is finding the understanding that it's a characteristic of the substance rather than per se a characteristic of the individual.
Yeah, and look, again, that's the thing. You try and humanise it a bit, but there are people who just aren't interested in that, and that's fine. And so then I sway them, as I said, with a few of the stats, the economics of it.
Get them with the numbers.
And then there are a few that are never going to be swayed, and that's fine. That's life,
Life.
But I think when you talk from your own experience as a resident, and you talk about the fact that in Sydney or around the world, the whole precinct changes dramatically in a very short period of time. And so I can only hope that that's going to be replicated here. And the fact that there are 50, 60 or whatever of them around the world, and that's been mirrored each time that these centres have opened, that the amenity, the feel of a place changes dramatically within a very short period of time. I look forward to that day.
So, Loza, can I call you Loza?
Yeah, you can call me Loza.
Well,
my full name is too long to go on there.
Oh, okay.
But Loza's good.
So this is by necessity, not by choice.
Not by choice.
So Loz, you've got the Residents for Victoria Street Drug Solutions name tag on.
Yep.
And out here it's probably 55 degrees.
And counting.
You've cut off your sleeves. So why are you out here? Was there a turning point where you decided to become a part of this group? Was it just over a period of time, just what you saw was?
Look, a bit of both. As I mentioned before, I've lived in and around Richmond, Abbotsford for 20 years in 3 or 4 different locations. I ride a bike every day to work, and so I see a lot. And I've lived where I live now for about 7 years, and the last at least 12 months ago, 18 months ago, something shifted, whether there was a mass supply or something, but the degree of drug consumption and drug overdose went through the roof like I hadn't seen it in all that period of time. And it was happening in laneways, it was happening in our bin areas, in carports, screaming sirens all the time.
Yeah, can you maybe explain for people who aren't that versed in the layout of Richmond? So where we're standing now is on the corner of Lennox and Victoria, or looking at the corner of Lennox and Victoria, and that's sort of
that's the epicentre,
the hub. So,
the so-called epicentre.
And where's your house from here?
Oh, mine's back along Nicholson Street. So Lennox Street, once it crosses over Victoria Street, becomes Nicholson. So we're actually in Abbotsford right now, and you go over those set of lights and you're in Richmond. So I'm just down the road half a kilometre, and I ride through that little epicentre every day, and it's just become a sad, sorry sight. It's sad and sorry for the people who are using the drugs. Businesses are suffering. I know this precinct very well. I've never seen so many boarded up, empty shops. But it affects everyone in a different way. But for the residents, it affects us on a daily basis. We come home not sure whether we're going to find someone overdosed in our laneway, or if you've got kids walking up to the primary school. It's entertainment time.
Just the trance music has just come on, isn't it?
Yeah, a bit of trance.
Compete with that.
And so it was a gradual build-up of what then got me involved, and then my neighbour Judy, who's the head honcho of the residents group, decided to run for council on the single issue of an injecting centre. And because she's my neighbour and I love her dearly, I said, yep, I'll help. And so that's how it started. And that's been the way more and more people have got involved, because particularly the core group, we are in the epicentre and we get affected by it.
What were the biggest hurdles from that when you decided with Judy to start this up? What were the biggest hurdles that you both faced in trying to make this medically supervised injection centre happen?
Look, I have to say it wasn't the community in general when we did door-to-door knocking and so forth. Vast majority, I was surprised actually, vast majority of people were absolutely in support of it, because everyone's worn down by what has been the reality, and knowing that for 20 years putting up more CCTV and having more police on the street doesn't change the situation, it actually makes it worse for residents. So I was actually really surprised that was the case.
Was that because you would find addicts trying to find nooks and...
Yeah, because they're pushed away
holes
from where they normally, and they go into little deserted laneways.
Away from less eyes.
That's
again.
right.
Yeah.
Fear of arrest, etc., and therefore our big spike in deaths. Because if they happen to get a bad batch, or they happen to just be at that point where they overdose and they pass out and they're in some dead-end, out-of-the-way alleyway, no one finds them. So those things, as I said, the residents' response, by and large, surprised me. I was thrilled. The biggest hurdle, in fact, was swaying our mainstream governments, our mainstream political parties, statewide I mean. The City of Yarra have for a long time had a very pro stance, the Greens, the Socialists, etc. But getting our Labor and Liberals on side, we haven't got the Liberals on side yet. There are individual members who are, but getting Labor Party as a party on side was the biggest hurdle, but it's been achieved. And I was so thrilled to hear Dan Andrews actually say I got it wrong. How often do we? Yeah, how often do you hear that?
Yeah. And I mean, I think that was the result of the research I've done, and I've interviewed Fiona Patton last week, and she's
amazing.
She's
my political idol.
Oh, she's fantastic, and she doesn't stop working.
No.
But it was, and they went on that trip over to Portugal and Spain and Canada and the US.
Yep. That's the thing, it's not new, it's not rocket science.
But which was great, which I didn't know, was that the Assistant Police Commissioner from Victoria went over with them, which is the first time that a member of the police force has gone on one of those commission trips.
Look, gradually all the things started stacking up, and it got to the point where the politicians could no longer block it. And when you start having all the regular groups, your AMBOs, your police,
AMA,
coming on going, actually, this is a no-brainer. We've got to do this. Then they're kind of, But I do sincerely believe that having a cohesive pro stance from a residents group really was very influential, because in the past, the traders, and this has changed too, and I want to talk about that a bit, but in the past, the traders were the groups that the politicians went to for an opinion, and they have been vehemently opposed up until recently. There was no cohesive residents group that they could go to, so the odd individual would go, no, I don't want it in my backyard. So having us formed was a very big shift. And then certainly after our rally that we had here in August, which was absolutely beautiful, go on our website and Facebook, you'll see it. The representatives from the traders and the representatives from our group were trying to engage with the traders to do the conversation, have the discussion. And thankfully that's really started to shift, and we're here today at the invitation of the traders group, which if you'd asked me that a year ago, I would have just laughed my head off. So those big shifts are happening because, as I said, for 20 years they've done the tough on crime approach. It hasn't shifted the situation. It hasn't improved the lives of the users. It hasn't improved businesses. Hasn't improved our lives. So it's fantastic.
Was it difficult at all being the Vietnamese town in Melbourne, a little bit more traditional,
It's still something we're really trying to proactively approach. So, again, making sure we have flyers done in Vietnamese and Chinese. We've tried so hard, and we're still trying to get some representatives from their communities involved with us as on our committee. That's difficult culturally. Again, we know individually there are many who support us, but culturally they won't speak out. But again, now that we've got the Trading Association on board, hopefully they'll see that it's being supported officially, and that might shift things. As you said,
they don't look like they're going against.
That's right,
against the
standard line. But again, you've got religious, cultural, traditional, conservative values, and in a way, I respect that. And not in a way, I respect that, and I'm not going to try and hope to shift them from that binary point. But I always operate on the middle group. The ones that could go either way. You've got your diehards who are pro, you've got a few diehards that are anti. It's the ones in the middle that could go either way that I think is where my energy is focused, and we've been so successful with that. But being here today at the invitation of the Traders Group signals a whole new ball game for me. I'm really optimistic that we can have more input from Vietnamese and Chinese individuals or store owners, and that's one of the main reasons why we're here today, is to take the opportunity to really proactively talk to Vietnamese and Chinese people, and thus far it's actually been pretty successful.
How influential are the Traders Group now? I know you said decades ago on they've been quite influential, but in terms of what happens around?
Could you ask the question again? I got distracted.
So did I. How influential are the Traders Group?
Well, up until I think they still are. And as I said, up until very recently, they've been very influential in the anti-camp. And but as I said, I'm really excited about what's next in terms of our relationship with them, and I think it's just going to be so amazing, and I think it will trickle down into the community. I'm very keen, and I was just chatting before to the women across from us here from the Vietnamese Women's Association, because they have their big headquarters just up over in Lennox Street there, and the women are the ones who are dealing with this as much as the men folk. Culturally, the men will be the outspoken or spokespersons of groups, but the women are, if you start talking to them individually, they've got a lot to say about this, but they just can't say it publicly. So you just have to, work on different levels and hope some of it hits home.
Sounds very nuanced.
Yeah. Well, the great thing is around the table of the executive, the key people, we've got some very experienced people with strategy, with marcoms, with production and event planning. So we've been able to utilise those in the way of approaching, and we've just had good luck. Serendipity too.
Great word. One of my favourite words.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about your rally that you were just talking about before?
Look, if you haven't seen it, jump on the website or our Facebook page. We organised it in August because, again, we'd done a whole lot of different community forums, and it just was really getting to the point where we just kept hitting that brick wall with the politicians. And we just thought we've got to actually show them volume-wise that there is a groundswell of an increasing groundswell of support for this, and they can't keep ignoring us. So that was one of the main reasons behind the rally. What we did in the week before the rally, we had commissioned a piece of street art, and if you haven't seen it, I'll take you around there, just around the other side of the Hive in Little Nicholson Street. Runs parallel to Nicholson. There's a huge street wall mural. We commissioned a graffiti artist to do it, and it's got in huge letters, "You talk, we die." And it was deliberately provocative, and of course that was unveiled on the Tuesday. Our rally was on the Sunday. So between Tuesday and Friday, all the media were all over that piece of street art, and the interviews were coming on, and so it was the perfect lead up. So we had planned for that to happen, and it became a real, every photo from every journalist, every article from every newspaper, etc., was done in front of that mural.
Well, I think one of the things I noticed, apart from the squabbles that were going on at Parliament House, if you looked at the media, I think you had support from every outlet, including News
Herald
Corp.
Sun, I've been interviewed a number of times on 3AW. I was interviewed on the day of the rally by 3AW, and they were very open and listening. So to go back to the rally, we began up at the train station up there near Hoddle Street. We had a cleansing healing ceremony from Arnie Dye, because there's a lot of healing to be done around here for a lot of people, but she's aware of the very heavy usage rate amongst Indigenous people. So that was a beautiful way to start off, and it was funny because we all rocked up. It was quite the opposite of today, a bitterly freezing, impending storm day, and we're thinking, oh, no one's going to turn up, because who would on a Sunday morning, and it's going to, the heavens are going to open up.
We haven't mentioned today, it's very hot.
Humid and hot. I can't take any more clothes off.
But this was the opposite. It's bucking down.
Well, it wasn't, but cold. There was, and the wind. It was just impending doom and gloom, and
not what you want as an event organizer.
No, but then it all just came together, and people just started appearing from everywhere, and the police estimated the crowd somewhere between 700 and 900. And we paraded down one side of Victoria Street. By the way, the police were amazing. And at the very front, we had invited any of the family of people who died, who we've already, have a relationship with. They were welcome. We wanted them at the front, in front of our banner. And we wanted, excuse me, ladies. I see them.
Always on.
I'm always on. Peripheral vision.
Looking after the boys in blue.
That's right. Yeah. And the police on the day of the rally were incredible. But we just walked down the Victoria Street. People who had suffered the death of a son, a daughter, a brother, a father, were at the front holding photos of, and they were mainly who spoke at the actual official meeting point of the rally, which was just on the little park in Lennox Street there. So it was very solemn. We had a little bit of music, but having that crowd all holding our little flyers saying "Supervised injecting saves lives," it was very poignant, very powerful, and a very strong message. And there's a couple of really great 1.5 minute vids on our Facebook website that really capture the moment. But to have such great police support, community support, and the impact of people telling the human stories. There's one family, Sam, a young guy who died in an alley down off Lithgow Street. His mother and grandfather spoke, and Laura Turner, journalist from Channel 9, spoke. Her sister died earlier last year, and what was really interesting for me in that when Sam's brother and when Laura spoke about her sister, they actually spoke really honestly and frankly about at times their anger. And their frustration at their siblings, why couldn't they just stop? And so some of what they communicated very much echoed what I think a lot of people, and including myself, well, why can't they just, go into rehabilitation and stop? But of course it's a complex issue. How many people have tried to stop smoking and don't do it first time, second time? Gambling, alcohol abuse, they're all about something else. But unfortunately, a lot of the people we see here on this epicentre are really at the lowest end of the pecking order. They're often homelessness or mental health issues. People don't look at them as human, and that's part of our job too, in a way. Well, part of our responsibility is to talk to them and go, and we talk a lot to them and say, if this centre happened, would you use it? And they go, oh, bloody hell, yeah, of course I would. I feel ashamed being here. I feel sad. I feel ashamed. Now, so all I can keep saying is I just think it's definitely not going to be worse, and B, it's going to be a hell of a lot better. That's how I feel, but the stats and the evidence from around the world show that is the case.
Do you feel as well, you just talking about reaching out to people, that it's going to be much easier to have those points of contact when there are relationships being built through a centre that is being used possibly most likely daily by the same individuals? Yeah.
Look, I think absolutely, because it is about people, staff within that centre establishing relationships. They get to know the users, they get to know their rhythms, their patterns. and often I would say their biggest story, so they know their vulnerabilities, and that's certainly been what I've been told about what happens in Sydney. And if it's modelled on the Sydney Centre, there after the drug use is finished, there's another room after that room, and they go there and chill out a bit, and there's counselling and support services. So there is that kind of broader monitoring and supervision beyond actually just making sure they don't die from an overdose. And that's what's critically important for us as a community is it might sound idealistic or fanciful, but is hopefully some of those people will get the support they need to get through into rehabilitation. And it might not work the first time, but for sure, if you keep them alive, there's more chance of it happening the next time. That's
certainly correct. Can you just quickly try and paint the image for me of where the centre's going to be?
Well, as you said before, we're in Nicholson Street, Abbotsford, near the corner of Victoria, where Victoria Street intersects with, on this side, Nicholson Street, on the other side, Lennox. You go one block over and another block, and to the left-hand side is a big green building, and it's the pre-existing North Richmond Community Health Centre. That's where government is proposing it will be based. And based on what government has told us, it's due to commence in July.
And are you happy with the location of the
Well,
centre?
I'm not an expert on these things, but again, based on what our Sydney I'll call them colleagues, even though they are the experts, but the information that Sydney has provided us when they were looking at where the one in King's Cross should be, it was purely based on the evidence of where is drug use taking place, where are the overdoses happening, and they actually plotted that out and said the centre has to be in the middle of that. There's no point, just for convenience sake, putting it on Swan Street or down the corner of near Collingwood, because that's not where the drug use and the overdoses are happening. So based on that information, I believe that the North Richmond Community Health Centre is a pretty good location. And I think also the staff there already do have relationships with quite a lot of the users, because in fact in the absence of a supervised injecting centre, they're often the first ones to rush out or be called out when there's an overdose in the car park or in the laneways. They're often, the caseworkers are called out, even though that's not part of their current official remit. That's what happens. Yeah. So I think in that level it makes sense.
Yeah, and they've already got the needle exchange
that's
running
right.
under there
yeah,
as well.
That's right.
So your role with Judy up until now was lobbying for this to happen.
That's right.
Now this has happened.
Well, as I said, we continue to focus on community education. So we'll, once February hits, which is next week, we'll post up our information about our next community forum. We run them on a monthly basis on a Thursday night, and we have different speakers from a whole range of organisations, or sometimes we've actually been speaking to a couple of users this morning who have put their hand up to come and present at a forum, because the forums are a chance for people to ask questions, because a lot of fear comes from the fact that you don't know and you're fearful of what you don't know, and so the forums are a really effective way of breaking down those myths, letting other people know that there's other people who have those experiences, giving them information that gives them facts. So we're continuing to do those, and we've actually had support from City of Yarra to do that, which was great. A bit of money always helps, because we're all volunteers, We're volunteers. We live here, so somehow we do fundraising and pay for flyers and so on. But back to the question, and the other big thing we're focusing on between now and July is to keep the politicians to their word. It's legislated. It's been announced by Daniel Andrews, and it's been announced for North Richmond and announced to open in July. We're going to do our very best to make sure that happens.
On a more personal note,
I'm single and available.
Oh wow!
Yes, I know.
Okay. This went from a professional relationship.
But you said personal. I misunderstood what you meant.
That's all right. That's all right.
Oi. Heat exhaustion.
Heat
exhaustion.
Yeah, just having someone wheeled past.
Bloody hell.
Well, it is hot. We did say.
We're not exaggerating, folks.
No, it is hot. Has living here and what you've seen over the last decade, has that changed your view of people with dependency problems, or have you always been sort of how you are now?
Oh, look, I'd like to, describe myself as a socially progressive person. I've been involved in the gay and lesbian community in a range of official capacities and volunteer capacities. So I know what it's like to live on the margins. Margins, that's a bit dramatic, but you know what I mean. So I'm in for the good fight. But I'm not going to be paint myself as a saint. There are days when I ride past there that I'm really pissed off and over it. So yeah, I'm not a saint, but I do understand rationally and reasonably that this is the best result that we can hope for, and I will keep fighting that fight, as is the rest of my group. You know.
How many in your group?
Well, we have a core executive of about 8 or 10, and then we have another. So 2 or 3 of the people here today at each hourly slot are volunteers. So they're kind of like the next rung out, who've come to us through the community forums. So I actually don't know how many is on our database per se, but we're up to on our Facebook page. We've got about 1,500 followers and likes.
Wow!
And it's a very proactive page. But certainly the people who are here helping us today are that next level. So I'd say probably 20 or 30 really proactive members.
Was that very important, your social media presence in terms of circulating information?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are a couple of people in our core group who are very gung-ho with that stuff. I'm a bit of a person.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go and talk to people.
Media representative?
Well, no, there's a few of us who do that, but I want to talk to people because the face-to-face stuff, it's all part of the picture, but yeah, the social media stuff was really critical, particularly in the lead up to the rally, getting the word out about that and getting the stories told was very effective in that way.
And were you surprised when you woke up in the morning that it was passed? What did you feel? What was your feeling when you first saw it? Did you have a bunch of text messages from...
Well, I did, but I'm just it might sound like I'm bragging, but I'm just stating a fact. I was actually in Vienna at the time, but interestingly, in the very same week, legislation was overturned in Vienna in a positive way. So now in Austria, they now have the legislation available for a medically supervised injecting centre. And it all happened in the same week. It was just like, wow.
You had the golden touch.
I did. Clearly my presence there But what was interesting about what happened in Austria was that their outcome came about through legislation being challenged in the courts, whereas what we had to do as a residents group and as a community was get it into legislation. So different routes there, but same outcome. So it was pretty thrilling being with my Viennese friends and going, hey, guess what's just happened in Melbourne? You know what I've been doing all these months that I send you videos? And they went, well, and the next day I think it was announced in Austria. So it was a great thrill. And yeah, I would have liked to, in many ways I would have liked to have been here, but it was actually nice being in the cold. I'm just going to mention the weather again.
Yes. Because it's
one more time.
Hot.
It's hot, baby.
Were you proud? Were you relieved?
I was thrilled, but I was quite shocked or surprised, not shocked, that it happened as quickly as it did. But as I mentioned to someone before, Judy kept saying for about 2 months, I really feel like it's going to happen. And I really think it's going to happen before the end of the year. And there are a few old campaigners in the health sector who we've worked alongside with, who've been part of this for 20 years on and I'm going, Judy, it's a marathon. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And Judy just going, I know, I feel it. So it happened. And even this same guy wrote Judy a message going, well, it has been a marathon, but boy, this last sprint's been amazing. Well done, guys. Because as I said earlier, I think, because none of the information has changed from the point of view of the health bodies, but the difference has been having a resident's voice, speaking consistently and loudly, but always reasonably and rationally, that we are in favour of this. So I think I was on Channel 9 News very early on last year and actually said, yeah, I'm putting my hand up. I want it in my backyard. I'll give you my carport because it will be better than what we're dealing with now. And so to have that very seismic shift, because usually, the usual suspects will be the ones saying, oh, but the residents, they don't want it in, Well, yeah, we do, because we know it will be better.
So you need to make sure your voice is actually being heard and not spoken for.
That's right, and that's been very much the big part of the campaign. And as I said earlier, at the rally, having people whose lived experience has been the horrid thing of having a sibling or a brother or a father, mother, sister die, and having that story told, critical in getting sentiment shifted. But again, there's still going to be 5 or 10% who are vehemently opposed. That's fine. That's fine. That's
90%
life.
approval rates.
Yeah, it's pretty damn good.
It's not bad.
Yeah, pretty damn
Haven't heard
good.
of that anywhere
Yeah.
else. And was it always a? I'll let you go in a sec.
That's right. I need some more water.
Was it always an injection centre that was the plan? Was
Yep.
there was
Yep.
no discussion?
There was no
something
plan
else,
B.
that was it?
No plan B. It had to be that. Because as all the previous measures over the last 20 years, I mean, we basically inherited it from Smith Street 15 years ago or whatever. It got pushed down out of there. So you can keep trying to push it somewhere else, but it then becomes a problem for that area. And look, Richmond Abbotsford is not alone in this issue of heroin use and heroin overdose deaths. And there are a number of hotspots around outer Melbourne that could well and truly benefit from a similar centre. And so occasionally we got contacted in that way and was going, well, let's get this first one up, show the success. Not that we really need to do that because there's 30, 40 years of evidence that it does, but let's show that it works, and then hopefully another one can happen in Dandenong or another one can happen in St Albans or wherever. But that's actually not our job. Our job is to get it here, keep it focused on that, get it happening, get it running, get it successful, and then I think it will make it easier for the next one and the next one.
And how frustrated did you get over the years? Because you said you've lived here for around 20 years.
Yeah.
So I know during Kennett's government and then Brack's, they both campaigned on the fact that, well, Kennett said, I think, that he would establish one, and Brack's around more than one. I think Brack's at one stage said he wanted
about
to have
5
3 or 4.
5 I think it was.
So living through that and then not seeing it materialise into anything and watching what was happening in Richmond intensify.
Yeah.
Was it frustrating?
Yeah, of course it was. Well, frustrating and appalling and outrageous, because you go, okay, well, how many more deaths? How many more deaths does it have to take one of your family to die, a horrible death, for you to change your mind? All the evidence, you don't actually need to send your pollies and your police overseas. The evidence is there, but I'm glad they went. But yeah, I of course found it frustrating, and it's just shocking that they could allow people to keep dying. And that's why, again, I think our wall art was so effective. It was deliberately provocative. You talk, we die. And you know, since it went up in August, it has not been touched by one other bit of graffiti. I'll take you around there.
Yeah. Do you want to go now?
Yeah, let's go now. I'll get you some water. I'll get me some water.
Hold that one.
Oh, now I've got 2. I'll interview myself. Okay.
Oh, that one's come out.
Can we?
Don't need that
How
one.
about we just finish it for a minute, and I'll get water for both of us, because I'm